was thinking before the show about, this whole scary talk that in order to make Formula One more exciting, terrible word, they're looking at shorter races, reverse grids, and all that rubbish. And I was just thinking, why have we gone so far down that path? And one reason, of course, is that we decided, or Bernie decided, that there was a thing called commercial rights, and that he could make a lot of money if he sold these rights that he owned as an entity. Because until that mushrooming of business, explosion, there was no thought about anything like that. And of course, it wasn't only Formula One, it was lots of other sports, and they all sort of fed off one another in terms of selling commercial rights. But the reality is then, the minute you sell commercial rights, you're taking the control of the sport away from A, the competitors, the people who really know the sport well, and B, the FIA, the administrators, who know the sport pretty well too. Admittedly, not always in sync with the competitors, but basically everybody is under the umbrella of Formula One. But the minute you bring in a third party that's basically very good at making movies, or very good at buying and selling companies, stripping them down and then selling them at vast profits, the minute you do that, you take away from Formula One a sense of direction of what is the purity of the sport. And so, as I said, before the show, I was thinking, so what is the answer to not making the races shorter, not putting on reverse grids and all the other rubbish they want to do? The answer, of course, as I've said a million times, is to make the show much more interesting and appealing. And I've said, obviously, long before Drive to Survive, I was saying that we should have lots of reality TV in the paddock area, obviously focused on the drivers who are the key players. But I never failed to mention also that there was a huge circus there as well, which can be everything from the team management to the technology, to the sponsorship, to the logistics, to the hospitality, to so many aspects of a team, to the young driver academies and so forth. And all of those have their own Drive to Survive stories to tell, if told well. And beyond that, between the races, there's an amazing story to tell. How much television time would you get now if we had live cameras in the debrief at Ferrari after the Italian Grand Prix? How much television time would we get if we had live cameras at McLaren when Oscar and Lando are facing one another off now on a Wednesday? That is what I'm talking about. You may say, oh, well, the teams would never do that. Secrecy, impossible to do it. Well, there's a thing called the Concord Agreement. And the Concord Agreement is the time when you draw up all these new things that the teams have to comply with if they want Formula One, if they want Formula One to continue to grow and make the money that they all want to make, you're going to have to make this a much bigger show. And it's up to the TV people and it's up to the teams to decide how they're going to do that, how they're not going to give away secrets, but nonetheless open a lot of doors and make Formula One much more than just the icing on the cake of the drivers. It's the whole enterprise. And it's no other sport has that. And we're not using that. It's like, I keep saying the tip of the iceberg. And the whole iceberg is down there underneath the ocean and nobody cares about it. We'll never see anything of it because the teams, left to their own devices, of course, will say, oh, we don't want anybody to know about anything. We don't even want to know what our organograms look like or who does this. But everything's secret. Everything's subject to our own NDA, whatever. But, okay, don't be a part of the Concord Agreement then. That's how you do it. And along the top of that, I would say, in addition, on the next Concord Agreement, the top 3 in the World Championship drivers should have to do a world tour at the end of the year instead of going to the Cayman Islands, wherever they want to go. They should be promoting Formula One in new frontier countries like South Africa, India, China, and so forth. There's so much to be done. Of course, if you took all of that concept to Liberty and said, this is my opinion of what we should be doing, instead of messing around with the length of races or reverse grids or childish stuff like that, we should get on with doing it properly. Everyone would say, well, it's a great idea, but it's much too complicated. Never happened. It's too complicated. That's what they love to say. And of course, in terms of buying a company, stripping its assets, getting rid of everybody, and then selling it on at a brass profit, that is not complicated. That's actually very easy if you can be that inhuman. Another question from Lee. I also think the Formula One owners underestimated the power of social media, how fans see through the mainline media. For example, the end of Max's pole lap wasn't shown. The focus was on something else. Yeah, well, this is all because it goes back to this whole business of the commercial rights and what they think are the important things in life. And they go back to some of the old cliche things like in the race, a Haas Ferrari pit stop is more interesting than watching Oscar and Lando a second apart playing cat and mouse, for example. They'll just cut to the pit stop, one of my pet hates. Another is the low down camera shots which tell you nothing. And beyond that, a lot of it is banal analysis, not based on reality. And that's a great shame. It's a great shame. They don't often show the differences between the drivers in a way that I think the public would love to see. And you've got to do that very well on specific corners. And it has to be adjudicated by somebody who can see the differences, not ex-Formula One drivers who just can only talk about the way they drove the car and have no understanding really of what any other driver ever did, which is always the problem with ex-drivers getting involved. I'm not criticizing them, they've got roles to play in other areas, but I think to get them to talk about driving style is, you know, a bit of a waste of time, to be honest, except their own style, which would be a great thing. So yeah, thanks for all that. It's a bit, you know, I don't know what the word is, it's just a bit frustrating, I suppose, that we were given this perception of Formula One that we've got to have more overtaking, top speeds are everything, and everybody wants speed and action and overtaking. And as I said, you know, I would love to see the Ferrari debrief right now. There's no action, overtaking, or anything else in that. That's all probably not a lot being said, to be honest, a lot of eye contact from one to another. And that's what Formula One should be doing. We should be expanding this whole cinematic experience into the entire iceberg and not just focusing on, you know, the weekend and what's going on in the paddock and all the beautiful people. That's, you know, you can do that anywhere. You know, you go to a movie premiere and you can see all that rubbish. What you want to see is, we want to see what Christian Horner's doing right now. I wouldn't have minded, you know, cameras in Christian's house at the weekend, getting him to react to what he was seeing on TV. That would have been pretty good TV, would it not? Anyway, people don't seem to think laterally, and they don't seem to understand that there's a huge story to be told below the surface. I mean, just one example of that. And you know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head now, but an email came in from Red Bull on the Monday after the Italian Grand Prix. Oracle, Red Bull, and Carlisle formed strategic partnership. I don't always read these emails because I think, what is that all about? And this is probably some AI thing or whatever. But I read this one. I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. Carlisle becomes Oracle Red Bull Racing's exclusive investment management partner, which implies that all the teams for the last 40 years have been out there searching, looking to try to get an exclusive management partner, investment management partner, to invest all these profits they make. I mean, what would Frank Williams or Ken Tyrrell think about that? They'd say, well, you know, whatever money we get in, we spend on racing. And what are we going to invest? Buy a new wind tunnel. That's about all we'd ever do for investment. Oh, no, they need investment. Anyway, I'm not decrying that in any way. All I'm saying is it's a first. They say it's a first. Both industries are experiencing periods of growth, powered by technology, fueled by data, blah, blah, blah. My point is, actually, the search of how Red Bull achieved that is quite an interesting story, probably. And that would be something that, if it was made into a proper 1 hour doc, and all the people involved in putting that together on both sides, quite an interesting bit of film. But no, nobody ever thinks of that. Red Bull will say, oh, well, we can't have cameras in when we're doing a deal like that because somebody else might find out what we're doing. You do it all retrospectively. You know, you do it in a way that, you know, there's enough creative people in Hollywood to be able to do all that stuff without in any way impinging on the team's secrecy or their own personal NDA. It's not difficult. It just requires energy and imagination.